What's up, everyone, and welcome back to the very first episode of the New York Jets franchise here in Madden 22. I've been very excited to start this series for quite a while now, but we were waiting on that scouting update. Now that the scouting update has been out for a couple weeks, we're still going to be familiarizing ourselves with it over the course of the series, of course, because it is a very brand new system, and we have not used it at all. And there's going to be a couple bumps in the road here and there, but it was definitely worth the wait from my early experience with it, at least. So before we get into the actual setup of this franchise, I do want to say that I am going to be using custom rosters for this series. I have been using these rosters from that franchise guy for the last couple years during rebuilds and just, screwing around with the game and things like that. And they are nothing short of phenomenal. I recommend them highly. If you have not heard of them, I will link them down below in the description. But it is basically a film-based rewrite of the entire roster, again, based on how they performed, and it also does a lot to equalize out different things like strength, block shedding, and other things that I don't think the EA does a good enough job of paying attention to in their base roster. So definitely check this out if you haven't already. It's what we're going to be using for this series. It's why some of the overalls might be off from what you're used to if you're familiar with this team. Unfortunately, I was not able to find a replica version of his draft class because I am actually playing on Xbox One, and his original roster was created on Xbox Series S and X. So since I'm playing on Xbox One, I haven't been able to find anybody who's actually made a copy of his draft class like the one that is made of his roster. So what I'm probably going to do, I found a draft from a guy who made 2 drafts already, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through the entire draft, and then just to show my dedication to you guys, I'm going to re-edit everybody to match exactly what the base roster that I'm going to be using kind of goes for. So I'm going to try and equalize out strength across the board and make it very similar to each position group. I'm going to go and look at block shedding for corners and all these different things. So I'm gonna make it fair. I'm going to edit it based on the ratings in the draft class, but also to match the roster. That way I don't have like a million amazing rookies just coming in right away. And it also handicaps me a little bit. But I don't want to do it before the draft. I don't want to edit the draft class because I don't want to know how good this draft class is. I want to just go through a season with the pure scouting and go for it. Anyway, the title, my introduction video, my previous announcement video, already teased it. We're going with the New York Jets, a team that just drafted their new franchise quarterback, hopefully, in Zach Wilson, but also has 2 first-round picks this year, 2 second-round picks this year, and still has a lot of team building and roster hole plugging to do, as well as a lot of long-term decisions. Are they going to retain Marcus May? What's going on with the defensive linemen on their team? What are they going to do going forward in the draft and different things like that? We're going to be starting in the preseason just to kind of shape the roster close to the 53-man, but also in a way that I think will help us out. So we're playing on all Madden simulation. We're going to be using sliders, which I'll go over in just a minute. Turning off that pre-order bonus, even though I do not have it because I bought the game after it came out. Just covering any major thing. I debated keeping superstar abilities on or off, but I actually haven't really noticed it so far in gameplay. I played a few games already. And then career clock we're turning off, because I think it's kind of unrealistic in the couple franchises I played before this one as kind of testing it. We're leaving progressive fatigue on, as well as practice injuries and prospect storylines. So career clock off, like I said, everything else is pretty much on. Dev trait management, we are going to leave on. I don't know why I went back there. But anyway, dev trait management, we're going to leave on breakout scenarios and trait regression because I think that's going to make it a little bit more realistic. Also, with this roster, it was designed in mind with long-term franchises, so there's going to be a lot of guys who are older that have higher dev traits just to kind of smooth out their regression and make it a little bit more realistic. And I felt like turning off that dev trait regression would have kind of ruined that. But anyway, we're going to start with 10 minutes, 25 seconds as our settings, and I think about halfway through the year this is going to change. There's a couple settings that I changed a little bit on. I can't remember exactly when because I played almost entirely the first season just to get far enough ahead, and also because I had a couple delays in actually getting this off the ground. It's out later than I had originally anticipated. But we're going to start now. This is just the settings we're going to go over for now, along with the sliders at the end of this video. They're just going to be the ones to start the season. It's not going to be necessarily the ones that we're using the whole time, and it will update you guys as we go through. So another thing that I want to say while we're still getting this set up is this is not going to be a franchise where we go in and play every single game, because I want just as much of this to be also about the team aspect, the team building aspect of franchise mode, and I want to be able to play a lot of prime years with a team that we really build up from scratch. I don't want to take the whole year to just play 3 or 4 seasons. I'm realistic about how busy I am and how much time I have to spend setting this franchise up. So I'm just gonna lay it out there. We're not playing every single game. However, I have a plan for what I am gonna do. We're not just gonna sim straight through the games. So hear me out. We're gonna play a lot of full games. We're gonna play roughly 6 to 8 full games per season, and then the rest are gonna be play the moments, at least to start, unless we come up with something else. But that's basically my compromise. That way we're balancing, the computer simulation of the roster that we built versus my pure Madden skill, which again isn't super high. I'm not the greatest Madden player ever, at least not anymore. So yeah. Anyway, we're setting up our scouts right now. This is going to be our scout group to go into the season. I basically organized this by what I thought our biggest need was, starting with cornerback. I also put scouts out on safety because I want to keep Marcus May, at least for the first couple years, just as asset retention. But I also know that that's probably our second biggest hole in the defensive backfield. Cornerback, we probably need 2 or 3 corners realistically in the first offseason. And then our second biggest need was offensive line. So I sent 2 scouts. I sent 1 for tackles and 1 for guards as our tier 1 scouts. And then our last need, or semi-need, that I kind of thought immediately off the top of my head was middle linebacker. I didn't really look at CJ Mosley's ratings quite much at first, but I didn't realize he's not the greatest coverage linebacker. He's amazing in the game against the run, and he's okay in coverage. But again, he's going to regress. He's already in his 30s, and he's paid a lot of money. So we're going to need to not spend more money at that position. We're going to need to try and find somebody at the draft who can fill in that role, whether down the road or just even in the interim. Nickel linebacker is one of those positions that I'm really not married to any specific person in that second spot, but also not really in love with CJ Mosley as our main guy either. While it's not one of our immediate biggest needs, I do think that, like offensive line, it's going to be something that's a lot easier to address in the draft than through free agency. We're going to go ahead now and load in a draft class. We're going on to Madden Share. And like I said earlier, I could not find TFG's draft class or a replica of it. Again, we're on Xbox One and not Xbox Series S or X like that roster was originally made on. So I did find one guy who had multiple years uploaded. It wasn't just like he had just next year or just this year. And I figured it was better safe to just go with that now and hope that he has like a couple extra years as the series starts to progress, then try and just mess with different ones and then end up having like duplicates of the same players and things like that. I don't know what the support cycle for this game's community is going to look like, mostly just because this is a dying console and eventually people are probably going to move on to bigger and better things as these consoles become more widely available. But I will go back through afterwards and edit this draft manually. We do have a few prospects I'm keeping my eye on. I do not know if we're going to be like a top 10 worst team in the league right away because I think this team's got talent. But there's, no reason not to look at the top guys just in case. Now, if I was to somehow have the first pick, like we're really bad or the Seahawks are really bad, I think Evan Neal is the most talented and most valuable player in this draft. But for our team needs right now, I think that I would probably take Stingley as the guy just because he's the most talented corner, and we haven't had like a elite level corner since Darrelle Revis. So it kind of is one of those things where it can change our defense. We also got Kyle Hamilton, who's a very highly regarded safety. Usually safeties don't go that high. I think Jamal Adams, who we drafted, was also the top one. He's really good at pursuit, and his play recognition is pretty strong as well. Now, the thing I like probably the most about this draft class system now is that it actually shows players based on how they relate to their peers and not overall talent in the NFL. Looking a little further down the board, receiver is a pretty big need. It's not one I'm necessarily looking to attack through the draft because I think you can find really good receivers through free agency. But Garrett Wilson is an intriguing option along with his Ohio State teammate Chris Olave, I believe is how you pronounce that. I haven't watched a whole lot of college football this year. And then continuing down, there's a couple other guys I kind of have a passing interest on, Kenyon Green and Tyler Linderbaum on the offensive line, and then Trent McDuffie and Roger McCreary at corner. I'm expecting that Seahawks pick to be somewhere between 24 and 32 in this game. They're probably not going to be a top 10 worst team in the league like they are this year. Most of that's due to Russell Wilson being out, but their defense has also been pretty atrocious throughout the year as well. Going through our region by region breakdown, I was trying to figure out how we were going to go about assigning our scouts. I was under the impression initially that we could actually reassign scouts throughout the year. However, I've been through multiple weeks and I have not been prompted to reassign them, so I think it's kind of one of those situations where once you assign a scout to a specific area, that's kind of it. So I think next year's plan of attack is definitely to kind of reconfigure our scouts around where the strongest prospect areas are. We will have a few less needs, I hope, going into next offseason as well, unless something dramatically changes between now and then with this team. I'm hoping our first offseason will be one of adding and not just replacing. But I think this is going to help a little bit more with our strategy as the series goes on, knowing that now. With that in mind, I am now going back through and just finalizing our scout assignments for the season. Obviously, Darrelle Revis is going to be our national scout. What better man to find strong cornerbacks than one of the best to do it in modern times? We're now going to transition into the regular season preparation as we are getting ready to take on the Carolina Panthers in the opening week matchup. And we got a couple of press conferences to go with this as well. Now, unfortunately, it doesn't seem like your game plan is kind of accompanied by a press conference for every week, which is a little bit disappointing. But I really wanted to focus in on this first week on Christian McCaffrey, who is easily the Panthers' biggest offensive threat. And I think that a big way to get our defense off to a good start is if we can shut him down or at least contain him relatively in this first game. Now, I don't think you ever shut down Christian McCaffrey. He's just so good as a runner and as a receiver, and there's no other player really like him in the league. But I think trying to contain his run game at least is going to put us in a good position to win this game. And speaking from firsthand experience, as an opposing defense, the more that you can force Sam Darnold to throw, the better chance you give yourself to win this game. I am a little bit worried about the Panthers receivers, though. We're very familiar with Robbie Anderson, obviously former Jet, amazing deep threat. DJ Moore is one of the best young receivers in the league and has emerged this year as easily one of the just best receivers in the league overall. The right side of their line is full of really good players, especially their right tackle, Moton. Brian Burns along that defensive line is a little scary as a pass rusher, but I'm not really afraid of anybody else all that much. Shaq Thompson, pretty good linebacker, but their rest of their linebacker core is a little lacking, especially with Hassan Reddick more than likely playing off the ball. Dante Jackson and AJ Boye are solid corners, but nobody that I'm really worried about shutting down any of our starting receivers, as we'll see our depth chart to close this thing out. I tried to get it as close to the real life roster as possible. Defensively, I'd already kind of knew what our game plan was going to be coming into this. I want to keep McCaffrey between the tackles. I don't want him to get outside and have open space to make plays. I want to force them to use him more as a receiver than a runner. But I was a little bit more torn offensively. Either way that we kind of decide to run our offense, we're going to be relying heavily on rookies. We have a starting rookie quarterback, but then we're also going to be mixing in a rookie running back a lot, as I anticipate Michael Carter to see an equal or similar amount of snaps to Tevin Coleman, mostly at the beginning. We'll see who performs better or worse, but I like both of their versatility. We're going to probably see Coleman in some more traditional single back sets, whereas Carter's kind of our gun running back just to start anyway. We kind of sit here and debate for a little bit, but he ended up going blitz counter just because the most talented player on their team is Brian Burns. So even though, or on their defense at least, is Brian Burns. So even though their defensive back unit is pretty strong, I'm more worried about stopping the pass rush from Burns than anything else. I think if we can get some good short runs, like good 4 or 5 yard runs consistently as the game goes on, and then complete some big passes or short passes anyway, and let the receivers do their work, I think we'll be in pretty good shape. We're also going to set our team goal. Now, not going to lie right here, I actually didn't know that you can set all of your team goals right here, so you're going to see me struggle through these first few weeks until I realize that. But I think if we can force Darnold into 1 interception this game, we have a really good chance of winning. And I think if we shut down the run and force him to pass, we're going to be in good shape to do that. We have one more press conference to get through as well, and this one is going to be about Zach Wilson playing in his first NFL game, and we're going to lay it out right here. We aren't going to set the expectation too high in his first game. We're going to try and make this more of a run game early on, get some short, quick completions, not force anything too major. Hopefully that will be a good situation. It ends up getting Zach Wilson 1,000 XP as well. And after preseason heading into the regular season, we had quite a few players who had some upgrades available to them. So we do get a little bit of boost coming into the start of this very first regular season. One of which ends up being Marcus May, a player I have quite a bit of expectations for. We also get an early boost for Elijah Vera-Tucker while he still has that hidden development. Him and Zach Wilson are going to be two of our focus players early on, along with Elijah Moore, who I will show the depth chart in a few minutes, but he is actually going to be starting this season as kind of our fourth receiver. I'm going to give the starting spot off to Keelan Cole. He has more experience and better hands to start out, and I think that'll really help with Zach Wilson. We also have second-year corner Bryce Hall, who I'm expecting to have kind of a big year in terms of improvement and show himself worthy of a starting job. He's a player that I think will make a big contribution to the series that's on the roster right now. 74 zone coverage with 79 press to start. Blake Cashman, he's kind of an in-between player right now, but hopefully we can develop him into a little bit more of an all-around solid linebacker. And maybe, who knows, he even makes it to a second contract with this team. I was debating what to upgrade him for, but I think we ended up going with the pass coverage package. That way we can make him a little bit more of that well-rounded player, and because he's going to be starting in our nickel, at least to start the year. A couple more players. We got John Franklin Myers, who just got that big extension in real life. Now, since this is going to be a simulation of the actual NFL season and not a real reflection of what's happened up to this point, it's going to exist in its own world. I'm going to hold off on giving him an extension right away. We're going to do all of our contract negotiations during the bye week, and we'll just see how it goes. We'll see how it performs, but he's definitely somebody that I want to keep around. And we're just going to kind of blitz through these last few. So for anybody who I don't see being on the roster long term, other than George Fant, I'm going to give him pass protector. But for anybody who I don't see being like a long term part of this team, I think we're just going to end up automatically upgrading. Basically for anybody who's just a body that I don't foresee having any sort of like long-term future with this team. But we'll go ahead and look through the depth chart. I think I pretty much talked about all like the key players so far. I didn't really talk about Corey Davis. The expectation, I think, going into this season is that he ends up blossoming into the number one receiver that the Titans thought he would be. I think that's a little bit unrealistic, but I think that if he proves himself as a solid, capable number two type receiver this year, then the Jets are definitely getting good value. We don't have a true fullback, so third-year tight end Trevon Wesco is going to be playing a hybrid fullback and tight end type role. As you can see, this is our depth chart for outside receiver. We got Mims and Moore hanging around the bottom. Tyler Kroft is going to be our number one tight end going into the season. Our offensive line, from left to right, you got Mekhi Becton, Elijah Vera-Tucker, Connor McGovern, Greg Van Roten, and Morgan Moses. Backup tackles are actually pretty solid in terms of this roster. I think if you have to see Fant or Adoga, we'll be in pretty good shape. The interior is a little concerning. Clark and Feeney are a little bit on the lower side, and McGovern's our only real center, so if we have a center injury, we're going to have to make some sort of free agent move. Defensive line might be the strongest individual starting unit on our team. You got Franklin Myers and Lawson on the outside, Quinnen Williams and Folo Fatukasi on the outside. Definitely want to keep this group together as long as we can. Starting backers, you got Jared Davis on the left, Mosley flanking the middle, and Cashman to his right. That's going to be for our base set. I believe we're going to see Marcus May start the season as the nickel backer. Corner, you got Bryce Hall, and Michael Carter, the second, is going to be starting on the outside, at least to start the year, but I expect to see some Eccles and some Pinnock as the season goes on. Guidry is going to be your slot guy just due to his height. Starting free safety, LaMarcus Joyner, and Marcus May starting as safety in base. You're going to see a lot of Ashton Davis this year in year two, though. Kicker to start the year is going to be Matt Amendola, and punter is going to be Braden Mann. On the return team, you got Ty Johnson handling kicks, and we're going to have Braxton Berrios handling punts. You'll see some more of the specialty guys, but it's pretty much just the normal roster. Other than the slot receiver is going to be Crowder and Braxton Berrios, and Michael Carter, like I said, is going to be a split-time running back. It's basically like him and Coleman are both the starters. You're going to see some pretty similar snap counts, at least early on to start the year, I think. But anyway, I'll let you guys look at the rest of the depth chart throughout as we continue to progress. But I'm very excited to get into the first episode, first gameplay episode, which will be posted later on this week. That is going to wrap up the introduction video, however, so I'd like to thank you guys for watching. Please leave a like if you did enjoy, and we'll see you next time for the next episode of the New York Jets franchise in Madden 22.